Hello everyone, Michael Bretti here from Bretti Musical Instruments. Hope you all had a fantastic holiday and New Year's. I know over my holiday break, I've been working pretty heavily on some new designs, some conceptual models, and even some testing for some brand new instrument developments in the works that I hope to be working on and developing out more for 2026 and launching at some point. So in addition to some new ocarinas, and new styles of ocarinas that have not yet been seen here at Bretti Musical Instruments, I'm hoping to dive into some new instruments altogether. So some historical replicas, some unique hybrid instruments of my own design. So a lot of exciting stuff to come. But for this video, I wanted to kick things off for this brand new year for 2026 with a super exciting batch. This is a custom Alto G4 ocarina batch, and this is definitely my finest Alto G4 set yet. This I think is really the pinnacle of my developments yet for the Alto inlines for my style of ocarinas so far. So without further ado, I'd like to give a first look and listen to batch number 19 of high-end wooden inline ocarinas from Bretti Musical Instruments. So like prior videos, over the course of this video, I'm going to be diving into the background and history of this build, kind of looking at the woods, talking about the selection and how this project evolved, and then diving into some sound samples, getting into the tone and response of the ocarinas, and then giving a song demo at the end. So, like I mentioned, this batch is batch number 19. It consists of two Alto G4 ocarinas. These are serial numbers 49 and 50. So these ocarinas actually were finished in 2025. So these are officially marked in my catalogs and on the inside as 2025 instruments, but they were just finished up off the drying racks for January of this year. So this batch consists of three different woods. This is a very, very unique set in a number of regards, and was a really fun one to start developing out. So to give some background of this build, the customer reached out to me several months ago, I think around August or September of last year. They had seen some posts of mine or some videos of mine from prior ocarina batches, and they were really interested in potentially getting one of the inline ocarinas. The ocarina they had honed in on was the ocarinas from a prior batch. So those were an Alto G4 batch made with bloodwood body, a zebrawood top, and an aromatic cedar mouthpiece. Now, at that time, I didn't have any of those ocarinas in stock because those had actually all sold out pretty quickly. That batch was released with a number of other batches earlier in the year for the for another event for the Boston Early Music Festival. And I didn't have any of those Alto G4s in stock. However, I told them, if you'd like, I can definitely look at building out a custom set exactly like that. So we started discussing looking into wood options. Definitely for the body, they were really interested in a really deep, rich, vibrant red wood, like that Brazilian bloodwood that I had found for that set. I had some Brazilian bloodwood on hand that I had set aside for a batch of tenors, which I hope to be launching at some point this year. However, for that set, the bloodwood was a little bit thinner, so I had to laminate. So that's actually going to be a triple layer lamination with maple and wenge. But the customer was really more interested in a kind of simpler, cleaner design. So they opted to go for a selection of wood for the body that wouldn't have any lamination. So I defined the right size wood at the right thickness for this build. So I started looking at a number of options, and the customer wasn't particularly married to the idea of bloodwood. They said, really any really rich, deep redwood would work nicely. So I started looking at my sources, and I came back with a number of different options. So I found some more bloodwood. We found some really beautiful aged padauk. I found some other kind of higher end options. I think there was some burls in there. There was some other. There's a whole range of options of redwood. So we kind of explored a few different sets, and there's a lot of back and forth in the communication of this. The customer still wanted that zebrawood top, so the zebrawood was relatively easy to source, because that's a little bit more common wood, and I've used it before, and I have a number of suppliers for that. So we were really focusing on trying to figure out the best wood for the body. Now, originally, I believe, and this was a while ago, so I might be mistaken, but I believe at the time we had settled for this really beautiful aged padauk that I had mentioned. So in the process, we were talking back and forth, communicating a lot through email, and just talking about ocarinas and instruments in general. And that's one thing that I really love about these custom builds is not only is it just, it's not just taking an order from somebody, building it, and then just shipping it out. It's really developing this relationship, this one-on-one communication, and this dialogue between myself and the customer, getting their feedback and learning more about my customers at a more personal level. And in our conversation, my customer made just the comments that they've been thinking about the design and stuff, and recently they had been dreaming about an African blackwood body, but they said it's going to be too expensive. From his experience, the African blackwood is way more expensive than padauk or bloodwood, and he said, I've been dreaming about this for an ocarina body, but it's not going to happen. I told him, hold on now. That's not necessarily off the table. Now, it's going to be more expensive than the bloodwood or padauk options for sure, but let me look around and see what I can find. So I started. We didn't commit fully to the red option. We started looking at some African blackwood, and from one of my suppliers, I stumbled across a really huge billet of instrument grade African blackwood. This stuff is jet black, absolutely flawless grain. These are massive billets too. I think it's like a 3 foot by like a 4x4. So this is literally a solid beam of African blackwood. Is absolutely flawless condition against, again, luthier grade material. This is the top tier material. I told my customer, I found this absolutely amazing, beam of African blackwood. It's going to be more expensive, but what I'm willing to do is maybe take a little bit of a hit on this myself, use this beam kind of as an investment board, so that always down the road I can make more African blackwood ocarinas, and we can use this. We can cut off a small section of this and use this to build out your set. So we worked out a price that was within the customer's range. Now, this ocarina set is currently my most expensive ocarina set yet. It's around the range of my prior released custom based C4 models. So for an Alto ocarina, this is actually quite expensive. But if you look at the wood selection, it is pretty reasonable. Just because African blackwood is one of the most expensive woods in the world, and for a custom instrument, even for something like this, it's really, all things considering, it's really not too terrible for what goes into the process. So we decided to switch from that redwood to the African blackwood, still keeping the zebrawood top. And in the process, I told him, since we're going with this insane, absolutely incredible deep black African blackwood, we're going to be going with a really cool top. And this is a custom order. I would highly recommend, just going for that curly old growth redwood mouthpiece. Again, I think that's going to complement this build so much better than the cedar. Customer actually agreed, and I think they even mentioned they might have had a slight allergy to cedar. It's not an issue for my ocarinas typically because they're fully sealed in shellac, so you're never really directly exposed to it. But this also kind of had the added benefit of, the redwood would make the customer feel more comfortable for their compatibility with woods. So we went ahead with that selection. I secured that beam of African blackwood, and it came in. It was incredibly beautiful. And at the time, I decided to buy 2 beams of African blackwood. At some point, I might even do a video just for that wood because it's one of the most well-known instrument woods in the world. It's insanely heavy, insanely dense, insanely hard, but takes an absolutely beautiful finish and polish. And despite being such a heavy and dense wood, it works beautifully. I didn't have any issue at all resawing it or carving it or shaping it. It works so easily on the tools, despite being one of the densest woods in the world. So the 2 billets actually came in. I got a second billet because I decided, you know what, let's just invest in some African blackwood now, some really nice instrument grade stuff. And one of my luthier friends, who does some amazing work for one of the most well-known Native American flute makers in the world, and his work also, my luthier friend work is absolutely insane. His carving skills and design skills are just unbelievable. They're just top notch. But he actually bought one of the African blackwood billets from the same supplier, I believe a couple weeks before I did. So, and when I had visited him in October, I got to see his block before mine came in. So mine came in. And I have a digital moisture meter, so a non-destructive contactless moisture meter, which I use to check moisture levels for the woods. And I knew that the African blackwood billet was not fully dried, but there was still kind of, taking that chance. It's really high-end wood. It's flawless, no cracks, no checks, no anything. I went to measure the moisture of the billets, and it was soaking wet. We're talking 20-30% moisture content, which you can't build instruments with that level of moisture. They really have to be much lower, 10-12%, less than 10%. So that was a little bit of a setback, because I didn't want to just start cutting into the wood and start crafting with the wood that was not ready yet. So I sat on it for a little bit. I told my customer, the wood came in, it's absolutely gorgeous, but it's wet. What I'm going to do is slice up some blocks from the end, see what the moisture is like that, and then kind of gauge where we want to go with from there. So the ends of the blocks naturally are a little bit drier. They're about 20%, 15-20% at the ends. So I sliced off one end just big enough to make a set of 3 Alto G4s. I resawed them, and because the wood is so wet, immediately after resawing, I recoated everything in shellac, and both of those billets had come in coated in shellac. Shellac is really great for seasoning fine woods like this because it helps prevent checking and prevents excessive moisture loss too rapidly, but it allows the wood to breathe, so it will still lose moisture over time and stabilize and acclimate to the environment. So I immediately sprayed all the surfaces down with some spray shellac, make sure that it's sealed immediately so I don't get any checking or damage that perfect piece, that billet and those perfect blocks for the altos. I set them aside, and I had waited, another few weeks, and the moisture level really hadn't changed. So I decided to go back to customer and I said, the moisture level of these blocks are lower. They're still higher than I'm comfortable with working. I don't want to rush this and, create an instrument with moisture levels that are too high and then have it shift around or crack, because, I carve it out and it loses moisture too fast. And it's really not the way to go for an instrument. So there's a few options from there. There was going back to our original design of, the bloodwood or the paduk. There was waiting on these blocks to fully dry out, and these would dry out much faster than the large billet, but it's kind of unknown how long they would take. And I said to him, these could take potentially up to a year to dry, maybe. And the customer had already paid for the ocarina. We had already discussed the African blackwood. He was really excited about the blackwood. He's been dreaming about this blackwood ocarina. And for me personally, it just wasn't fair to have this customer wait, a year or more for these blocks to dry. So I told him, you know what? I'm going to look for another block of African blackwood, one that is actually fully dried. It's going to be more of a cost on my end. Actually, I'll at that point, getting a new African blackwood block, properly dried and seasoned and everything, meant that I'd be taking a loss on this set. But I told him, you know what? He paid for it. We settled on this design. He really wanted the African blackwood. I didn't want to go back. I wanted to continue and push and make his dream ocarina come to a reality, even if it was at a loss for me for this set. And the customer was really understanding. He was like, I really appreciate it, but if you, I don't want you to take a loss on this. If we can figure out some other ways, if you're comfortable, or if you really want to, I'll go with your suggestion. And I just told him, let's go for this. I want you to have the ocarina you dreamed of. The African blackwood was a risk. I took it, and it's beautiful wood, but it's just not ready yet for making ocarinas. So I'm going to see what I can do and find another set. So I looked around, and I went to one of my other suppliers, and just by chance, I found a block of 10-year-old air-dried, fully seasoned African blackwood. The block was exactly big enough for several Alto G4s. It was a much smaller block, but again, it was fully dried. It's been air drying for 10 years. I grabbed it immediately. I told my customer, I got this block in. There were some areas in the block that had some natural checking, that had some sapwood. So again, this block was a bit of a risk because I didn't know what to expect sawing through it when I got it in. It's possible there would be parts that would make it so that I couldn't make this into an ocarina of this size. But I said, you know what? I'm going to take the risk on this block. It's fully dried. Let's see what happens. The block came in, and it ended up being large enough for 4 ocarinas, so I resawed it. So I could make 2 Alto G4s, which are this batch, and then 2 Alto A4s, which will be a future batch. So the wood came in, it ended up working out perfectly, and I just ended up moving forward pretty quickly with the rest of the build. Now the next part of this, after the African blackwood was in and I had gotten that all squared away, was figuring out the top. So originally, they still wanted to go with that zebrawood top, so I laid out a whole bunch of different options, everything from very straight, clean grain zebrawood to more wavy wood. I threw in some marble wood, which has kind of similar colors to zebrawood, except a little bit more kind of wild type grain pattern to it. And what I had done was, with each of the samples of woods that I had placed my ocarina template over the grain so the customer could actually see, in different orientations, if it was straight or if it was diagonal or to the side, and how different areas along the boards would be. So initially, the customer had picked some more wild grained wood that was like the prior bloodwood and zebrawood ocarinas. And after thinking about it for a little while and discussing it with his wife, he came back and he was like, you know what, I really prefer a very clean aesthetic. So instead of this kind of wild grain, let's go with a very straight, clean grain zebrawood. So on the zebrawood boards, the grain was very, very straight, but there were some areas that varied a little bit in terms of the striping and the banding. So what I proposed was there's this really beautiful area where there's this kind of darker striping in the middle, and then it kind of faded out towards the edges with lighter striping. And I said, I can center this exactly in the middle, so you have that nice clean stripe down this denser stripes in the center, and it kind of fades out towards the end, the edges symmetrically. The customer liked that idea, and we went with it. And then finally, for the mouthpiece selection, because this was such a high-end wood with that high-end build with that African blackwood, I decided to tap into my special reserves of curly old growth redwood. So I have a range of redwoods, and in some prior builds, I've matched the redwood with a redwood stripe. I've done different redwood pairings sometimes, a lighter redwood with lighter woods, some darker redwoods with darker woods. And I have some various grades of redwoods within, that realm of higher end mouthpieces. For this batch, I selected from two of my, what I would consider, finest reserves of redwood. So this is really richly aged, deep redwood. One option was a deeper earthy red, and one was a deeper earthy brown. And I, set pictures of the blocks next to the African blackwood, kind of to compare which the customer would prefer. And the customer ended up going with the slightly earthier red type tone, which I think ended up working out fantastically. So with all that background, after all those woods were done, selected, I ended up going through the build and proceeding and finishing these up. So with all that was again a long background, very long-winded. I apologize, I usually ramble on a lot, but each of these ocarinas have such a backstory and a development, and we're talking half a year almost of development and planning and different things that goes into these builds. So let's actually take a look at these ocarinas. So like I mentioned, these are ocarinas serial numbers 49 and 50. So I actually completed out serial number 50 last year, right at the end of the year, which is I think a pretty cool milestone for this build. I started doing ocarinas officially at the beginning of the year. So to hit that number, I think was pretty exciting for these ocarinas. So we're going to take a look at the wood selection now for these. So this is ocarina number 49. So we're going to start with the black. This is the foundation and the essence of the wood. So this is the African blackwood. Again, 10-year air-dried African blackwood. This is absolutely incredible material. It has just such a beautiful, deep black, really dark, rich grain to it. It's kind of hard to see the grain, but in the light you can actually see kind of that brown grain to it. And going back, depending on the light, this African blackwood will either look really black, or when you see it really closely in the light, you actually can see some of that beautiful grain. So go ahead and just obscene polish. And I know a lot of instruments like recorders and other stuff that use African blackwood, those are finished with oil. So you have to usually re-oil them. For all my instruments and my prior African blackwood shun and the African blackwood ocarinas, I fully seal them, so you don't have to worry about oiling them or anything. They're they're pretty stable. They're moisture sealed. So the inside is sealed with shellac, the outside is sealed with the hand applied varnish. So you don't have to ever worry about doing any, extra oiling or protection. So they're fully protected, and I think it really gives it just an absolutely looking at that polish, that's a mirror polish. That's absolutely exquisite. It's a really just incredibly beautiful, really heavy wood. I mean, this is one of the heaviest, densest woods in the world, and you can feel it. This is an alto ocarina. It's relatively, compact, but this thing has a good heft. But it gives it a really it's a luxurious heft. It's a nice weight, a nice feel, just a beautiful feel for a wood ocarina. So this particular one was a very clean part of the board. So there's really no checks or cracks or anything. There's a little bit of a natural inclusion on the side here, a little bit of a tiny natural crack in the side there. Again, not issues at all with the ocarina bodies. And you'll see in a minute with number 50, this one gets a little bit more wild with some sapwood inclusion. But this was a very clean piece of African blackwood, really beautiful. Again, it was really such a joy to work with. Next, we have the zebrawood top. So you can see here now that the zebrawood, you have this kind of dark, more denser banding of zebrawood, and then on the sides you have that lighter banding of zebrawood. So this was fully intentional. This was designed into it, and I've mentioned this in prior videos. One of the things that I pay very, very close attention to is not only the wood selection and the colors and tones of the woods and grain and patterns and everything, but also the orientation of the grain in relation to the body. And depending if it's straight, if it's horizontal, if it's diagonal, it can change the aesthetic of the instrument. And for custom builds, not only do I let my customers pick what woods they want, but with those boards that come in, I actually let them select along the board what part of the grain they actually like, as well as giving them my own feedback and some different options, because every board is going to have variations in the grain. So this could have gone in a number of ways. This could have gone diagonally, this could have gone horizontally. There's other areas of the grain, but when I saw this, I thought it would be just really cool to have that symmetrical, because again, my customer really wanted this clean aesthetic. So I thought, having that center stripe, that darker kind of center banding, and then the lighter banding symmetric on the sides would give it a really clean, unique, sophisticated look. So again, that works out really nicely. Zebrawood is, again, another hard, heavy wood, takes a really beautiful polish. And I think it adds a really nice contrast with the African blackwood. You have, the dark blackish brown veining of the zebrawood that complements the African blackwood beautifully. Finally, you have the curly old growth redwood mouthpiece. This again is from my personal reserves of redwood, so I have very little of this. It's very hard to find redwood like this, at least for me, for the qualities I'm looking for. So this is, top tier redwood with a top tier body and a really beautiful, unique contrasting top. So now to give a sound sample, I'm going to play up and down the scale of this so you can actually hear what this ocarina sounds like. So this is ocarina number 49. So, in terms of tone and response and just feeling control of this batch, I have to say that, again, not only from the wood selection, but from the response of this ocarina, this is my finest batch of Alto G4s yet, and one of my finest altos I have ever made. And both of these ocarinas, their voicing and response is just so on point, so similar, so perfectly matched that they play identically, and it really comes down to a difference in aesthetic for the ocarinas, which really only comes down to the blackwood. There's some variations. In terms of the tone, it is bright, clear, sweet. It just has just this presence to it. It's just so crystal clear from the low end to the top ends. The low end is really open. The top end is really open. It has just beautiful clarity. It plays so smoothly, so effortlessly. Voicing this set was pretty brutal. I've mentioned this a number of times in the past that inline ocarinas are known, especially for serious ocarina makers who have explored ocarinas a lot. They are known to have a weird dynamic of kind of squeaking at the high end, and especially for extended range inlines, I found for the alto and smaller sizes, actually, they are more prone to this underblown squeak, which emanates from how the air enters the body and establishes, a resonance mode in this that amplifies the second harmonic on those last few notes, particularly when the thumb holes are open. So you get that weird harmonic that if you don't control it, if you're not perfect in your voicing, you can get a little bit of an underblown squeak. That is kind of natural for inlines for the extended range. I do as much as I can to voice it out. A lot of times I am successful. A lot of times there's some, it's still a little bit there, but it's under control. Some earlier ocarinas have a little bit more of it, and it kind of varies. I'm working on fully eliminating that, but it's probably one of the most complex problems to solve in, I feel, in single chamber ocarina making. These ocarinas do not have that at all. They just speak effortlessly. They're just so responsive. It came at a price. I had to redo the voicing for both of these about 4 times, which means, not just carving the windway, because the windway consists of the top block that's carved out and glued onto the bottom mouthpiece block, but redoing it in the sense of where I would voice them, I would glue it on, I would check the voicing with the top. I wasn't happy with it, so I sawed it off, I redid it, and I kept redoing them over and over again. And it's just these literally microscopic adjustments in different aspects of the windway, of the exit chamfers, of the alignment of the labium to the center line of the exit of the windway. So just these tiny, tiny microscopic adjustments that makes or breaks the ocarina at this level. And I was able to achieve it for both of these ocarinas. So it's an immense undertaking. But at this point, I feel like at this current stage of where my development is, I can't voice an alto ocarina any better than this. This is, I think, really the pinnacle of these alto inlines that I offer, and it is just it plays as beautifully as it looks. It's just, and all my ocarinas play beautifully. All of them are going to have slightly different variations. I don't think there's necessarily any bad ocarinas, but I definitely think there's certain tiers of ones that stand out. And this is one of those sets I think that really stands out in terms of that response in tone. So just really exquisite response, and just tone and everything about it. It just sings. Next, we have the second ocarina of this batch. So this is ocarina number 50. So, like I said, these ocarinas in terms of voicing, they're literally pretty much identical. The only difference is in the African blackwood. So you're going to see here immediately that this one has a noticeable bit of sapwood on the side. Now, for me, I've said this a lot of times. I love woods that have a heartwood sapwood mix. I think it gives instruments a lot of character. I use it for other instruments myself personally. I've always loved that aesthetic. I know there's some people who don't like that. They think sapwood is inferior, or, a piece of wood like this needs to have all the sapwood removed. Especially when you see things like African blackwood on instruments, typically people demand absolutely flawless pieces of African blackwood. If you're making clarinets or recorders or oboes or guitar necks or whatever, fingerboards, the African blackwood has to be absolutely flawless. There can't be certainly no checks, no cracks, no sapwood. Otherwise, it's just using that is almost blasphemous. For ocarinas, though, I find it doesn't matter. You can have natural checks, you can have natural cracks, you can have beautiful pieces of sapwood, bark inclusions, and it really gives it this, really wabi-sabi type feel, this beauty through imperfection, because wood is a natural material, and I love to explore the natural varieties in the wood, and really, instead of trying to hide away those kind of flaws, really exemplify them in the design. So I think this ocarina shows that off perfectly. So again, you have this nice patch of sapwood on the side. This ocarina has several noticeable checks in it. So in running through the sapwood, there's just natural checks that run down this side. There's a natural check running across here. There's some large kind of inclusions on the side here. These have all been stabilized, so it's not an issue for it to continue cracking under normal playing. Obviously, for things like African blackwood, you're not going to want to take this out on a winter day and just play it outside. That's just asking for trouble for any instrument. For most woods, it doesn't matter. But what I did for these is I stabilized the cracks with super glue. That's a pretty standard thing. I did a partial fill of the cracks with African blackwood dust and CA glue, which is standard. And this is also part of that design aesthetic, in that I could have filled all the inclusions, I could have filled all the checks, made it, flawlessly smooth, really hid those cracks, taking the opportunity to hide the cracks, hide the inclusions, but I decided to leave them in there for the texture, for the look, to kind of exemplify the natural beauty. So instead of doing a full fill and sanding it flush and trying to hide those cracks, I did, just a partial fill to stabilize the crack, but still left it so that way you still have that crack texture, you still have that feel, you still have the look of that natural age cracking. That's just a natural part of the process of the wood drying out in there. Still fully stabilized. On top of that, I have multiple layers of varnish. So again, it's not an issue, but I decided to just kind of leave that feature as natural as I could for this particular ocarina. So you have, again, that really beautiful sapwood with the African blackwood and the natural cracks. And what's nice is this sapwood actually matches perfectly with the zebrawood top. So again, you have the same exact identical look of the zebrawood, where you have this really clean, super straight zebrawood grain. You have this dark zebrawood banding in the middle, and then it evenly goes out to a lighter banding on the sides. So really beautiful, clean, classy look. And for this ocarina, again, that sapwood matches that color of that zebrawood really beautifully. So it kind of gives it a really unique look. And then finally, you have the beautiful kind of darker red, premium aged old growth redwood mouthpiece. So really, in terms of aesthetic between the two of these, in this set, there's this option of a really clean, classic, solid African blackwood, or a little bit of a more wild, kind of natural African blackwood. Both options are absolutely beautiful. Both options, you can't go wrong with. They're voiced exactly the same. The zebrawood tops are pretty much identical. The redwood is pretty much identical. So it's only that little bit of character. If you want, a really clean ocarina, or if you want one with a touch of a little bit different, I think they can fit multiple preferences. So after this video, obviously the customer's going to decide which one they would like, and they really can't go wrong with the selection. So now going into the sound sample for this ocarina, I'm going to play up and down the scale in a short, some improvisation on this ocarina. So this is what ocarina number 50 sounds like. So like number 49, this has absolutely flawless clarity to it. Has a bit of texture. The nice thing I like that I've come to really like with the inline ocarinas is they naturally have a little bit more texture to them. They're less hollow sounding than clay or plastic transverse ocarinas, or even wood transverse ocarinas. They're more flute-like in tone, so they have a little bit less hollow resonance to them, a little bit more textured flute-like tone to them. It gets really amplified with the wood. Absolutely, again, just beautiful clarity across the top, from the bottom to the high. It just flows so effortlessly. The breath pressure, I can't get any better than this. It's slightly rising for both of them, so it starts out a little bit lower on the low end and kind of goes up, nice even on the high end. But it's a very easy ocarina to play in that I always voice my ocarinas to be more easy to play. And I know I see this debate a lot about, especially with 12-hole transverse ocarinas, that there's a lot of players, a lot of beginners that complain, the high notes are super, super excessively airy. They're super hard to hit. They have to put a lot of effort into, forcing those notes out to play, and they still sound flat. They still don't sound good. With these ocarinas, they're very, very expensive ocarinas. Yes, my ocarinas are very expensive, but with the technique, once you get them down and playing, they play those high notes just absolutely beautifully. The low end is a little bit more reserved. On these ocarinas, it's actually a little bit more open, so this is a more, balanced and dynamic ocarina than typical. But you have that clarity that just flows out effortlessly. You don't have to push these ocarinas super hard. You don't have to scream into these ocarinas. They will play, and you will really be able to enjoy them and really explore the ocarina to a very high degree, I think, with these. And it's even something that I discussed with my customer. Is he had kind of a much cheaper beginner model from a very popular, very well-known, very recommended ocarina maker brand, and he really didn't like the tone and the feel of it. And a lot of times these there's a few particular brands, they make very good ocarinas, but they're, I think, continuously pushed onto beginners, saying that these are perfect ocarinas, and if you're not playing if the sound isn't, good, or you don't like it, then it's your problem. It's your technique. You're not playing it right. To some degree, yes, there is that technique aspect, but I think in another degree, I think a lot of times, a lot of these common ocarinas are pushed onto people with the expectation that because a lot of people use them, everybody's going to like them. And that's not the case. I've played those ocarinas myself, and I personally don't like them. I don't like the breath curve. I don't like, having to force those high notes, sometimes the super shrilliness or really airiness of certain notes. And I've kind of tailored my ocarinas to my preference. People are not going to like my ocarinas. People are going to, like my ocarinas. So there's that variation. But, I discussed this with my customer, in that, at least for their preferences, I feel like this ocarina, this set would really fit their preferences nicely, and how, with the breath pressure that they're looking for, with the clarity of the notes, with the tuning and the voicing and the tone, and even things like I've seen coming up in a lot of discussions, the debate about the acute bend, which, as a maker, and this is another thing for another subject, I personally feel that, and there's other makers out there and other kind of advanced players too that have feel the acute bend has long kind of been a hindrance in terms of the ocarina realm, where it's become an accepted norm. And as a maker, I see the acute bend as unacceptable for voicing the ocarina. If your ocarina needs the acute bend to play those high notes, it's not well voiced to begin with. It's not well balanced. You can play around it, and you can get around it. That's another for another topic. But that just because it's been accepted in the community doesn't mean that it's necessarily a positive thing for the instrument. And I think makers need to be held to a higher standard, and players should demand more from makers. Certainly, very small individual makers like myself, and many others out there that make incredible ocarinas from clay and wood, really put our hearts into it, and really try to make the best ocarinas where we can. Whereas a lot of larger mass-produced manufactured ones, you don't have that extra human care, that extra human touch, that focus on perfection, that continued drive to push the craft further and further from an individual sense of perfecting your skills and creating an ocarina that embodies much more than just being kind of a mass-produced instrument. So this is a whole nother debate. I'm not going to get into it now, but I think there's a lot to be said for the many small makers out there that really put so much effort into developing their own unique style of ocarinas that goes beyond the typical expectations of what the common ocarina is seen by many players. So with that, this kind of wraps up. This was a very long segment. This was a really exciting build. There's a lot of challenges and setbacks with this build, but it came out really fantastically, I think, and I feel that this set will really help a customer push their skills to the next degree in the tone and playability that they're looking to achieve for their ocarinas in general. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up with a short song demo. So for this song, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I will be playing a traditional Korean folk song from Jeju Island. So that's actually my wife's hometown. This past summer, we had visited her family on Jeju Island and in Korea. And on the island, I ended up picking up a few folk songs on some traditional Korean flutes, and so I transposed them to the ocarinas. So this particular song from the island is Odoltoggi. So please enjoy this rendition. So that wraps up this batch unveiling. So this is the first batch of 2026. Batch number 19 of high-end wooden inline ocarinas from Bretti Musical Instruments, consisting of two super custom, super exquisite Alto G4 ocarinas made from just an amazing selection of 10-year air-dried African blackwood, zebrawood, and curly old-growth redwood. So, like all my other custom builds, this was a long journey. It was really fun speaking with my customer, getting to know them, just talking about ocarinas and music and other things in general, really connecting with them and really hopefully bringing their dream ocarina vision to a reality. So whichever ocarina my customer chooses, which they're probably going to be watching this video right as it's released, you know, I wish you the best of luck on the choice of your ocarina. The choice is in your hands now, and whichever ocarina you choose, you just can't go wrong with. The voicing, the tone response, it's just at the pinnacle of what I've been able to do for these altos, and just the aesthetic, I think, really came together beautifully on these ocarinas. So after that first ocarina is selected, I will probably be listing the second ocarina for sale on the Bretti Musical Instruments shop page. So there's a link in the description below for the Bretti Music website. If you like these developments and you want to follow along more, you can check out the Bretti Musical Instruments Instagram and Facebook pages, where I have lots of pictures and updates of builds and things to come. Right here on the channel, where I do unveiling videos and song demos for each of the ocarinas and instruments that I make, and then updates on the actual website, which has pictures of all the builds I've done today, all the information for all the instruments that I've done, current available offerings. So if you'd like to commission kind of your dream ocarina like this, you can reach out to me at any time. And stay tuned for a lot more to come. This is just the first of many exciting builds for this year. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.